Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that your this video finds you well, healthy, secure. Let's head again into this Ongi Kuden. And the last couple of videos, we've been quite firmly ensconced in what this monk is saying the Ongi Kuden actually states. So, the first few pages, it kind of wandered around with many documents, but it has certainly settled into what is purported to be a document created by Byakuren Ajari Nikko Shonin when it's unclear when it was created. It doesn't show up in the record of Nichiren's canon of teachings until a couple hundred years after Nichiren's dead. So there's a little bit of controversy as to whether it's even authentic. But as is claimed by the translators and the record keepers, this is a document created by Byakuren Ajari Nikko. The Ongi Kuden, not this document, the Ongi Kuden, are his notes from lectures given by Nichiren on the Lotus Sutra. And a lot of it tracks. The beginning of this document has a serious error in it. And it shows up, the thinking in that error shows up a little bit in the first few pages. But since we've been firmly ensconced in this monk's reporting of what the Ongi Kuden says, everything tracks with Nichiren's teachings, albeit reminiscent of a bit of a castigation, if you will, that Shakyamuni had given to a monk in the Lankavatara who kept asking a question over and over again, albeit slightly differently worded, that there's a real, I'll call it a tradition, because he's certainly not the only one guilty of it, of these student monks taking apart every single word in order to what? More accurately understand? The thing is about Shakyamuni's teachings and Buddhism, and certainly Nichiren as one of the great scholars in the lineage of scholars all the way back to Shakyamuni, is that a great deal of effort is made of expedient means. And that is to say that enlightenment, as we experience it when we chant Daimoku and when our mandala starts to do strange things, become three-dimensional or jiggle around, or as we focus on it, we're awakening our perceptive mind, our Buddha mind, to understand that everything is a flow, nothing is static in the universe. But to really explain with words what that is, that sensation is really, all we can do is point to it. Until you experience it for yourself, you won't really know. So there's this almost a gamesmanship of sorts, of looking at every word and making associations with it that reflect the meaning of the various stories, skillful means, devices, ways of understanding how the mind works, right? And we see it on full display in the Ongi Kuden, taking a sentence and not only dissecting each word or each phrase and indicating its meaning, but what's more fascinating and what's really kind of indicative of a different kind of student, a well-versed student looking at three words and associating those three words with several different teachings within the canon of Buddhism. And I think that gives this document away as a note-taking senior monk who is trying to capture, and Nichiren would have probably done this. It makes sense he would have done this with his 6 closest disciples. He's getting near his own death. And he's saying, look, you need to understand the Lotus Sutra and what it says profoundly, in a way not only for you to understand it, but for you to be able to communicate it to others whose experience won't be the same as yours. They may need to hear it from a different point of view. They may need to hear it associated to a teaching that would help them by your understanding of their lives. They need to understand more about this kind of distraction. Maybe they're a parent and they have children. So the story of the physician has a real relationship to their life. Whereas the story of the dragon daughter it's not personal enough for them. So you can use these 3 words of this sentence in the Lotus Sutra, and you can use it to explore that teaching or that teaching or that teaching. They all fall in line with what is being said in the Lotus Sutra. Oh, what a helpful teaching tool, right? And so the more I read it, the more I see this kind of a use case. And in fact, as I was first suspecting as we began to read this document likely was made by a monk much later than Byakuren Ajari Nikko. Although the Ongi Kuden, I have no dispute with that being Nikko's writings, but certainly this is a one person removed from that writing, because he's referring to it as the Ongi Kuden states. If I had written it and I was writing down, I would just state it. I wouldn't refer to my own document as the document states it, as though the document precedes me, right? So this is obviously another monk. Whether that monk is immediately a student of Nikko's or somebody who comes along 200 years later and is studying to expand his own teaching capacities and doing the very same thing in the lineage of head monks, right? So, I have no dispute with the document as a document of study. Whether it's contemporaneous with, I think it's obvious compared to the previous document we read, the Onko Kikigaki. Ooh, dry throat. That document was very clearly authored. The author put his name to it and said, this is what I've heard, and I'm transcribing from the lectures that Nichiren has given to us 6 monks, recorded by Nikko with 1K. So it's obvious that that's his note-taking. So that document sits, even though it doesn't appear till much after Nichiren's passing, the credibility of the voice and author of the document being in contemporaneous with Nichiren makes more sense. But there is no evidence of that nature of the Ongi Kuden. We can say by reference, this monk is reading a document that may have been created at the same time, but the entirety of this translation certainly didn't. So anyway, I'll leave that argument for academics. What we're doing, you and I, is studying some scholarship of Nichiren's doctrine of the Lotus Sutra, albeit with that glaring error at the beginning. But we can put that onto whoever this monk was. And it's annoying me that there's this consistency throughout the Fuji school of missing this very, very key point, that being that we've been cautioned by Shakyamuni, by Nichiren, by others, do not follow the person. Do not follow the person. Only follow the law. Shakyamuni tells us 3,000 years ago, he understood this is an experience that's deeply personal. It's a self-motivated practice. No one can give you your Buddha-ness. Only you can attain your own awakening, because it's deeply involved with all of the energies, karma, from which you're created, you're manifested. Therefore, your path through that karma to opening your Buddha mind is going to be very unique to you. So nobody else can tell you, just do this and you'll achieve. What we can tell you is, chant the Daimoku. This is Nichiren's great advent in our epoch, our time, is that we have a tool that will enable us to awaken those singular personal aha, insights, moments. And through that process, we will awaken our Buddha-ness, right? But nobody can do it for you. And nobody can take it away from you either. It's all yours. It's already there. You simply need to unlock your path to that space, that mental space. So therefore, with that in mind, Shakyamuni said, study all of Buddhism. Study the whole every piece of scholarship you can find on Buddhism. Not because you have to, but because if you're struggling with opening that path to your Buddha-ness, somebody said something somewhere in the scholarship that will relate specifically to you. And you need to find it. And that's not limited to one document. Even the Lotus Sutra, though it is the ultimate teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha, and many scholars over hundreds of years have come to that conclusion and have talked about that conclusion, including, of course, Nichiren. It may be in your study, the supporting documents, if you will, of all the preparatory teachings leading up to the Lotus Sutra, might just have that story, might just have that expedient means, might just have that association that you need to hear to go click, oh crap, now I get it. So don't limit yourself until you find those moments, because that's what ultimately gives you the confidence, the knowing that now I can be enlightened. Now I can awaken my own Buddha nature. I'm convinced of it. And this is what Nichiren keeps saying. You have to have that kind of determination, confidence, resolve. That is part and parcel of moving your samsaric delusions out of the way so that you can see clearly, boom, Buddha. Now, after having said all that, I've seen many a person commit themselves to doing Daimoku, motivated by their own need for a profound change in their lives, and chanting, and then seeing them physically and visually, body position, their eyes, everything about them change when they have that aha moment simply by chanting the Daimoku with their mandala and experiencing Buddha-ness. So is study absolutely essential? No. But unless you can chant, and every time you chant your Daimoku, you transcend your samsaric trappings and experience the flow of energy, that Buddha-ness, that amorphing fusion with the mandala, that you know your Gohanzen, your internal mind, is moving, happening, active, then I would say whenever you feel any kind of a doubt or a waning in your confidence, you need to study. Because through study, you will regain a sense of purpose, and you will then, therefore, more quickly attain your Buddha mind. So that's why you can't discount study. Because with study, again, we find inspiration. You can find insight just by reading some of the sutras. We don't really know what our samsaric locking mechanisms are. We know they're there. But some of them have very, very deep roots, and we're not even conscious of them. That's why Daimoku is so powerful, because it's equanimous. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care about what your path is. It simply invokes, right? But when we walk away from Butsudan and we go to our job or our whatever, it's hard to keep that mindset. The minute somebody cuts you off on a highway, you could lose it. Right? So study strengthens our resolve. Study gives us a bigger cushion that we don't immediately snap out of our Buddha-ness. We go, oh, okay, this is samsara. That was quite a dangerous thing you just did, right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So glad negative it didn't get worse. Or do you cuss out the car and honk and oh boy, I'm in samsara. Boy, I'm in it. So anyway, we go on with this monk's document of study and teaching aid. From the 6 important matters of the Medicine King chapter. Now I'm curious to see what he says here. 3. This quote, this Lotus Sutra 2, in the same way. Now, he doesn't say the Ongi Kuden says this. So, let's see. He may yet tell us. He's talking about the Medicine King chapter in the Lotus Sutra. Quote, this Lotus Sutra 2, in the same way, can enable living beings to separate themselves from all sufferings, from all sickness and pain, and can lose the, the bonds of birth and death, end quote. And there's a reference to a particular document. Now, he says, the Ongi Kuden states, the heart of the Lotus Sutra is that the worldly passions are precisely enlightenment and that birth and death are precisely nirvana. The two words separate, quote unquote, and loose, end quote, go against this teachings. Nevertheless, the word separate may be read as illuminate, quote unquote, when one observes them by opening the eyes of wisdom of the, quote, fathoming the lifespan, quote, chapter of the origin teaching. Sickness, pains, sufferings, and troubles are illuminated as being originally inherent. This is the wisdom of the Buddha who has received the recompense body for his own enjoyment. Boy, I dislike that phrase. Lose means that our birth and death are not birth and death that have just now begun. They are birth and death that are originally inherent. This realization loses the fetters of the notion that enlightenment is acquired. The two words separate and lose represent Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Here we go. Again, word salad. This is very convoluted. I have to believe, and I don't know how to read Japanese, nor Sanskrit, for that matter, or Chinese. So it's hard to say how this English translation exactly mirrors the original document, which would, if we're to believe the Ongi Kuden was written by Byakunin Aja Nikko, that it would have been written in Japanese. To my understanding, and see, and even this, if we're evaluating this document on face value, that's either note-taking. You know, when you take notes when you go to college or even in high school, sometimes you go back and you reread your notes and you go, what the hell was I referring to there? Right? As it's the nature of note-taking. If you're trying to take notes as you're listening to a lecture, there's something important you want to capture, and you try to synopsize it and in that moment. But in that moment, you're hearing a bunch of other things too. And so you may be satisfied with your abbreviated note, but later on, without the context of the entire discussion and how things have built on one another for you to get that notion, is missing. And suddenly it's hard to relate that. Now, having read that with my experience and my study, I can tell you what I think is being said there. And I could do that with confidence. But that's not really analyzing this document, is it? That's utilizing this document to make a clarity, a point of my own, that this might or might not be about. But just because I don't want to just be a critic of this document, in that that's not my mission. My mission is to study in the broader sense, Nichiren's doctrines of the Lotus Sutra so that I can better my practice and yours, right? So I'm going to go ahead and give you my 2 cents on what I think that's about. So the Medicine King chapter really focuses on the story of the monk that burns his arm or burns his body in a trade for hearing just a few more words from Shakyamuni Buddha. And that he would trade in his body. And there are different versions where his arm burns for 300 years, or that his whole body burns, but parts of his body don't burn. There's all sorts of versions that are not necessarily the Medicine King himself, that Bodhisattva that's in the story. There's eons and eons. You know, the expedient means are very broad and fanciful, right? But the lesson in the Medicine King chapter is simply the nature of our strong dedication and resolve to our Buddha mind. This is the constant theme, that you can awaken your Buddha mind, but that you have however many years experience on this planet, a tremendous amount of thinking invested in identification of this samsaric world. So it's going to take some extraordinary conviction and simply determination to uncloud that mind, to reach into our ninth consciousness and see with clarity, with our Buddha nature, what the actual fact is of this process of life, of all life. Everything we do, from schooling to television, to social media, everything is based on thingness. From money to celebrity to you name it, everything is about possession. So, especially in this era where it's unbelievable how many distractions and connections and barrage of information we're constantly filtering, how much more difficult will it be to simply awaken our Buddha mind? That's why we have a tool that's so straightforward. Because if it was any more complex, we just wouldn't do it. We just opt to be in the rapids. So the Medicine King chapter is about developing that kind of determination that, yeah, this is all here, and I'm not going to get rid of it, but I need to see it from a clear, pure perspective. By doing so, I can then be in it without being dragged into it. Does that make sense? So, loose and separate, or lose and separate, those words aren't a conundrum for us, if that's how we understand the Medicine King chapter. There's a separation of our Buddha mind and our samsaric mind. That's easy to understand. And we lose the attachment, the voracious possession of the samsaric mind. And then by losing that, we strip the stress, the tensions, the anxieties, and we can now freely appreciate everything without those tendrils, those hooks, and flow right along with everything. So we lose all those myriad anchors that cause our suffering. So, yeah, in that way, the words separate and lose, they don't confuse us. They make perfect sense. This word salad is trying to say that, but I don't know that it accomplishes its task. Maybe in the 15th century it did. I don't know. Let's go on. From the three important matters of the wondrous sound chapter. Now we're changing chapters. We're moving through the Lotus Sutra now. 2, the knot of flesh and the white tuft. Now we're talking about these expedient means, kind of folklore, if you will, about the appearance of Shakyamuni Buddha, or what the appearance of Shakyamuni's Buddha mind would appear as, if that makes any sense. The Ongi Kuden states, these two marks result from filial conduct and obedience to one's teacher. To uphold the Lotus Sutra is the pinnacle of all filial behavior. So understand, this is toying with that duality of Shakyamuni human, Shakyamuni Buddha. Buddha being his mental state, represented in his bodhisattva endeavor on the planet, versus his bodhisattva manifestation from his human body or physical realm. There's a lot of this. It can be very confusing, and I think it was confusing back then when Shakyamuni uses the voice of Buddhahood as Buddha, I this, I that. But it's a device that he uses because everyone memorizes I this, I that, and practices I this, I that every day for themselves. And it's a clever device, isn't it? Because now I'm reciting a teaching that I'm owning in the first person. Thus, I have heard, I have attained enlightenment in the distant past. You see, if you think about it, the way it was taught, not in writing, but verbally, and spread for hundreds of years that way, then it becomes, wow, what a clever device. Because every time I sit down and I say I this, I that, just like when we recite Gongyo, we are enforcing our own Buddha nature. Every day I think, every moment of every day I think, how can I make others attain the way like me? When we're reciting Gongyo and chanting, we're not reciting ancient words about ancient people. We're reciting words of confirmation of our own enlightenment. Not mine, yours. I this, I that. It's really, really clever. Right? So, this filial behavior is in essence saying that your Buddha, my Buddha, when they express, and since they're already inherent in our life, that Buddha-ness is like the mother and father of our existence, right? You could look at, it's poetic, but if you look at the nature of this universe coming from an intense ball of energy and manifesting every potential it can, we being one of those potentials, that energy of formations, the formations into forms, amalgamate, they are our formation. They are our parents. In a samsaric mind, they are our parents, our ultimate parents, our maximal parent. And when we chant, we assume the role of the parent. Make sense? So, the marks of Buddha result from filial conduct and obedience to one's teacher. One's teacher is Buddha. To uphold the Lotus Sutra is the principle or the pinnacle of all filial behavior. Of course, because the Lotus Sutra is Shakyamuni saying, this is how I do it. This is how I've accomplished Buddha. And guess what? When you read that, you say, hey, this is how I accomplished Buddha. It also states, the white tuft indicates the carnal desire of the father, and the knot of flesh, the carnal desire of the mother. That's what I just said. The manifestations and amalgams that amount to a volition to experience, right? We learned that long ago in the 3,000 Realms, discussions, origins of life. Look it up on this channel in the little search bar. The red and white fluids appear in this sutra as these two marks. Red and white fluid, what could those be? So you have blood, which refers to the womb, the ovum, the eggs, and the white fluids, the sperm, the progenitors of humanity. It also states the knot of flesh represents the wisdom of true suchness. What's true suchness? We talked a lot about suchnesses, right? It's not just the characteristics, the colors, the shape, the form. We can describe samsaric formations or forms ad nauseum, but their suchness is the formation that results in those forms, right? So the suchnesses are far more specific to the origins, that which makes, that which appears. That's why that word is so important. The knot of flesh represents the wisdom of true suchness that accords with conditions, and the white tuft, the principle of true suchness that is unchanging. And once again, we're talking about the energies of formation and the forms from them. Now Nichiren and his followers who chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo are endowed with these marks. Because this is what we're saying in Gongyo. This is what we're saying with the Daimoku. That I am the very formation energy that presents me being. Buddha mind. When we are first born, we are red in color. This corresponds to the knot of flesh. And the white bones that remain after our death corresponds to the mark of the white tuft. Our red color at birth indicates the wisdom of true suchness that accords with conditions, while our white bones after death indicate the principle of true suchness that is unchanging. Keep this secret. Again, like this is a big drop the mic moment. It was then. It may still be now. Depends. If this is what triggers your resolve, then fabulous. But it's another way of expediently trying to relate the true suchness of all that exists, this entire universe, as well as you and I in it, with our samsaric identifying. It's a transient meaning, if you will. From the 6 important matters of the Samantabhadra, chapter 6, this person is no, I'm sorry. I'm wearing glasses and I still can't see. Quote, this person in no long time shall surely arrive at the place of enlightenment, end quote. Even the sentence is convoluted. Oh, this is the question-answer format. Question. The Lotus Sutra starts at the beginning of the introductory chapter with the word thus and ends in the concluding Samantabhadra. So this is this particular chapter. With the word departed. So it starts with thus and it ends with departed. What teaching did the sutra's translator, the Tripitaka master Kumarajiva, have in mind to express? Now that's a very interesting sentence, isn't it? Because what it implies is that this problem of translation and trying to capture the translator's bias in what was meant has been following Buddhism since centuries and centuries and millennia ago. Answer. The 2 essential teachings of this sutra are the true aspect of the Dharmas and the Buddha's original enlightenment in the remotest past. The initial word thus indicates the true aspect, and the concluding word departed represents the remotest past. Okay. The reason is that the true aspect corresponds to the principle Ri and the Buddha's original enlightenment in the remotest past to actuality Ji. Principle has the meaning of emptiness, and emptiness has the meaning of thus. I'm starting to think I'm at a babble. Baptists do this a lot. Not all Baptists, but I'm thinking of certain famous personalities. They take, again, it's this fetish of words and trying to imbue each and every word with an immensity of teachings. And I think it can be very confounding and confusing. But let's see if there's anything helpful here. In this way, thus corresponds to the principle and to emptiness. The commentary states thus means not differing or differing, and has precisely the meaning of emptiness. Emptiness, if you'll recall from several discussions, is the reality that everything is always in flux and changing. So it's never static. Emptiness, I think, is kind of an unfortunate word in that it so characterizes nothingness. But that's not what emptiness means in the context of Buddhism. If I could come up with a better word, maybe non-substantiated, right? Not made, but an experience, a constantly flowing kinetic momentum of stuff. Never resting, not at rest. And in that regard, the word empty hardly suits it in our contemporary mind, right? The remotest past corresponds to actuality. The reason is that the fathoming of the lifespan chapter of the Origin teaching has as its primary meaning the 3,000 realms that are perfectly present in actuality. They're present, but only moment to moment, right? We have to be really careful with the way these translations are worded because they can drop very important concepts by a shortening, which really, it kind of defeats the meaning of the original. Departed corresponds to the past, okay? Depart has the meaning of opening, thus has the meaning of integrating. Opening represents the mind that discriminates. Integrating represents the mind that is without discrimination. I guess that would be integrating into your Buddha consciousness, which is no integration, right? Oh, I don't like the way this is written. When opening and integration are applied to the beings and the Buddha, the integration represents the Buddha realm and opening the realm of the beings. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the analogies are that as we practice Buddhism, as we chant Namo, which I'm sure we'll be reminded of now, Nichiren and his followers somewhere, when we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, we are opening our Gohonzon mind, our Buddha wisdom mind, to then enter the Buddha realm, the ninth consciousness. And that being an opening, we are mentally opening to our Buddha realm. And integration means encapsulating, embracing this entire universe of thingness as a flow understood through Buddha-ness, a flow of non-static experience that we all share. Words. The word thus at the beginning of the introductory chapter represents the non-duality of the Buddha and the beings. Because Buddha is inherent in every moment that we exist. We are not two, we are not other, We are the same thing, although our samsaric experience deludes us to that fact, drives us away from that fact. It attaches itself, right? The trace teaching corresponds to the realm of non-duality because it sets forth the principle of true suchness that is unchanging. Thus, now see, that could confuse somebody too, unchanging. What's unchanging? You just said everything's flowing. You just said everything is non-substantiated. Well, if you can, again, we have to bend around these words, but if you can understand that everything in the universe, you and I and a chair and the camera and everything, is in flux, is never static. It appears so samsarically, but in actuality, everything is constantly in change. And that is the fundamental aspect of everything in the universe. Then you could stand back as an observer and say, that process is throughout. Therefore, you can't identify different parts of it as being different. It's all the same. It's all unchanging. They're just all these different sparks from the same activity. Or as I say, manifest potentials from the same source. That is unchanging. It's going to continue until it doesn't. So it's unchanging. Thus, to express the aspect of duality, the beings who all hear the Lotus Sutra equally are ranged in separate categories. Okay, departed, the last word of the origin teachings, corresponds to the wisdom of true suchness that accords with conditions and to the realm of duality. Hence, the user of the word departed of the... Oh, okay, so that's the statement in itself. In other words, all of these, what I'm calling potentials, are all the same thing, albeit conditions being slightly different. The condition for a painting, the condition for a butsudan, the condition for a mandala, the condition for this video. They are all manifest of the same sources of energy, but they're assembled according to the conditions of the electromagnetic waves, the particular particles that are assembling or assembled, so on and so forth, right? How was the plastic put together to make the parts of my camera that are videotaping me right now? They all went through their individual processes. They all were captured from something else that had its own individual process, right? That's the world of duality. And this is why he then ends the sentence by saying, hence the use of the word departed. Because nothing can depart if everything is the same. But because there's a duality, we can observe something moving on, being departed. You really have to be careful how to read this stuff. Departed of they bowed and departed corresponds to the thus, nyo, of true suchness, shinyo, that accords with conditions. The origin teaching expounds non-duality on the basis of duality, two and yet not two, consistently identified and constantly differing, from past to present, spontaneous and unchanging, end quote. One should ponder this passage of commentary. Now he's referring to commentary. I thought we were in the Lotus Sutra. Oh, I guess the commentary would be the Ongi Kuden. This word, departed, is also related to the 5,000 who rise and depart from the assembly. Oh, this is a whole other teaching. The reason is that according to the transmission that has been handed down, these 5,000 persons represent the 5 levels of defilement. These 5 levels of defilement bow to the Buddha, who is one's own mind, and depart. So if you'll remember early in the Lotus Sutra, as Shakyamuni is proclaiming, I will now set forth this one vehicle teaching, a bunch of Hinayana monks, arhats, who thought they had accomplished enlightenment, all looked at the Buddha and around and said, we already know this. We don't need to be here. And they all leave the assembly. To which Shakyamuni is not very kind. As soon as they're gone, he says, and this is written different ways depending on the translation, now that the trash is gone, let us get to the business of speaking about enlightenment. So Shakyamuni displays a great disdain for those who would think they had achieved what, in his opinion, they had not. This is the source, if you're curious, of even to this day, this animosity between the practitioners of early teachings of Buddha's Hinayana is a derisive term for these early sects, as opposed to Mahayana, more scholarly developed teachings of the Mahayana, which include the Lotus Sutra. And so the basic chasm or divide between those two is that the early teachings are all about understanding the nature of self and the mind, and that one must endeavor to lessen the influence of the ego and the constant obsession of attachment of self, identification. And we talk about that all the time. It's still in Mahayana. It's just that Mahayana goes far beyond that. In that, Mahayana says that in itself is an important step, but it's not the ultimate step. Once you achieve that, you're now ready to course in the world as a person who understands how to do this and enable others to do the same. In that enablement, you will once again reevaluate the nature of self unhermetically by experiencing other selves and rubbing with them to teach them. You will have to reinvestigate your own opinions of what you think you've discovered. And in that activity, as bodhisattvas now, you will reach a more complete enlightenment and perfect your Buddha nature. That's not available in those earlier teachings. It wasn't even talked about. So the Mahayana is the full development of Shakyamuni's teachings. Understand? And that, like I said, that's still going on today. It should be, because the more time goes on, the more irrelevant those early teachings are. Read Nichiren's Gosho if you want to see how much he was a proponent of getting rid of those sects as actual enemies of Buddhahood. Where are we time-wise? Oh, I didn't realize the time was going by so fast. Okay, well, we've gone a good ways. And I guess we're going to continue with those two words, thus and departed. Seems almost silly how much. But again, it's not so much about those words, this document, as it is about ways of exploring the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha and the Lotus Sutra. And the form definitely feels like a highly experienced student taking notes and trying to make references where he can then take on the responsibility of teaching and promulgating Nichiren's thought. I mean, that's a big responsibility, right? So, yeah, it's what it reads like. And we'll see. We'll go on and we'll see. We have a couple more pages. And then when we're done, I'll give you my thoughts, to surmise my thoughts on this document and how it is useful or not useful for our understanding of Nichiren's doctrine, the Lotus Sutra, and Shakyamuni's teachings. But like I said, there's a lot here that tracks, albeit a lot of word salad in here. But I think we're muddling through it pretty good. There's some statements that are pretty obvious, others not so much. Anyway, don't be dissuaded. It just points to the fact that talking about Buddhahood is almost an impossibility. You can only inspire others to look for it with you. When they experience it, the words, they won't be able to talk about it either. Or it'll just sound, you'll understand it, right? Amongst our Buddha minds, we understand it. But somebody listening to us would think we're out of our minds. That might not be a bad thing. All right. Thank you so much for listening along. I've just made a purchase of some new equipment for streaming, getting ready. There are a lot of expenses involved in this, but we've had the benefit of some great patrons who've really helped financially the ability to start working toward this live broadcast kind of thing that I'm hoping we achieve. With your help, we will. And I know I'm putting myself on the spot. It's, these, I don't script any of these videos. I don't know if you've thought about that. So I speak off the cuff. I don't always say everything in the perfect way, but I'm hopeful that through some some talking, that my points will come across, and that more important than that, that somehow you find something in what I say that is useful to strengthen your practice, because that's the reason we're doing this, Sangha, right? And those who are able to support expanding the capabilities of this channel are helping all of us. So please give a thought toward those who can. If you can, wonderful. If you can't, you're simply by liking and subscribing and sharing, you're doing the work. And you also are contributing greatly to helping all of us keep our practice steady, strong. Be mindful of your health. Be kind to each other, yourself first. Because if you're not kind to yourself, you won't know how to be kind to others. It's very Buddhist. And don't forget, threefoldlotus.com. Lots of free documents and things you can download and read there. And the audio podcasts you can carry around, download. They don't take nearly as much space as these videos. And with that, I will see you in the next one. And maybe we'll finish, maybe we won't. I kind of feel like Ben Crow of Crimson Guitars here. A one-day build taking 10 weeks. Anyway, kind of an obscure reference there, but just saying I'm not the only one. And I look forward to next time. Thanks again. Be well. And bye for now. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho 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 Renge Kyo.
Kyo Namo Myoho Renge 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 Kyo Renge Kyo Namo Myoho 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 Myoho Renge Kyo Namo 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 Myoho Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Renge ko namo myoho 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 renge ko namo namo myoho renge ko 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 myoho renge ko namo 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 myoho myoho renge ko namo 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 myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Renge kyo, namo myoho 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 renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Renge kyo, namo myoho 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 renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, namo myoho renge kyo, namo myoho renge kyo, namo myoho renge kyo, namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Namo myoho renge kyo, 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 namo myoho renge kyo. Hanam Amyo Myoho Renge Kyo Namu Myoho Renge Kyo Namu Myoho Renge Kyo Ho Ben Pondai Ni Ji says on Jusan Mayan Jo Niki Go Shari Hachi Shobu Chi E Jin Jin Morio Go Chi E Man Shomon Yakashi Butsu Funo Chi Cho Wi Shaga Butsu Shingon Yakasenman Nakamushu Sho Butsu Jingyo Cho Butsu Murio Doho Yum Yo Cho Jin Yo Sho Fuman Joju Jin Jin Mizo Uho Suigi Sho Setsui Shunange Shuju Inen Shuju Hiyu Koen Gongyo Mushu Ho Ben Indo Shusho Rodi Cho Jakasho Ishaga Nyorai Ho Ben Chiken Haramitsu Kai Gu Sokusari Hachin Nyorai Chiken Kodai Jinya Murya Muge Jinyu Musai Joju Isai Mizo Uho Shari Hachin Yorai no Shuju Fumbetsugo Se Shoho Ganji Nunane Shushin Shari Hachasu Yo Ganchi Muryo Muhen Mizo Uho Busich Joju Shi Shari Hachu Busho Joju Dai Chike Unange Shi Ho Yui Butsuyo Butsunai no Kujin Shoho Jiso Shoi Shoho Nyoze So Nyoze Sho Nyoze Tai Nyoze Riki Nyoze Sa Nyoze In Nyoze En Honmaku Gyoto Shoi Shoho Nyoze So Nyoze Sho Nyoze Tai Nyoze Riki Nyoze Sa Nyoze In Nyoze En Nyoze Ka Nyoze Ho Nyoze Honmaku Gyoto Shoi Shoho Nyoze So Riki Nyoze Sa Nyoze In Nyoze En Nyoze Ka Nyoze Ho Nyoze Honmaku Gyoto Myoho Renge Kyo No Raiju Yohan Daiju Raganiji Butsugo Shobo Satsugyu Isai Daishu Shosen Nanchi Nyorai Jo Daishi Go Bugo Daishu Nyoto To Shinge Nyorai Jo Daishi Go Bu Ubu Go Sho Daishu Nyoto To Shinge Seiji Bo Satsu Daishu Mirakawi Shuga Sho Buka Butsugan Se Son Yui Gan Se Shiga Toto Shinju Butsugo Nyose Sambaka Bugan Yui Gan Se Shiga Toto Shinju Butsugo Niji Se Son Chicho Bo Satsu Igo Shigan Yoto Taicho Nyorai Hi Michijin Shushi Riki Isai Seken Tenin Gyu Ashura Kai Gon Shakamune Butchushu Jakajigu Kogaya Jofu Wanza Odojo Budai Nenzen Nanchi Gachi Jobutsu Irai Muryo Muhen Yakusenman Nokanayuta Kohin Yogo Yakusenman Nokanayuta Asogi Sansendai Sensei Kakeshi Unin Machi Mijin Senman Nokanayuta Asogi Kokodaige Ichijin Yose Tokyo Jinsei Mijin Chosen Nanchi Yoi Yunga Se Shose Kaka Tokushi Yui Koke Chigu Shufumi Rakabosa Toku Bakabutsugan Se Son Murya Muhen Hisan Jushochi Yakuhi Shin Yakishokyu Isai Shoman Yakachi Butsui Muro Chifu no Chiyu Chigo Genshu Gatok Ju Ayu Yochi Chi Oze Chichu Murya Muhen Niji Butsugo Daibo Sashu Sosen Nanchi Konto Fumyo Sengyo Nyoto Se Shose Kan Yakachaka Mijin Gufu Chakasha Jini Ijin Ichijini Kogajo Butsuirai Yakusenman Nakanayoda Asogi Koji Juzerai Gajo Zai Shishaba Sekai Seppo Kyoke Yaku Yosho Yakusenman Nakanayoda Asogi Kokodori Shujo Shosen Nanchi Oze Chugenga Setsunendo Buto You one han yo se kai ho ben fum bet sho zen nan chi yaku shu sho rai shi ga sho gai butsu gen kan go shin to sho kan ri don su sho odo so so ji zetsu myo di fu do nenki dai sho yakabu gen gon. Ui chuju ho ben setsumi myo ho no ryo chujo ho kangi shin so zen nan chi nyo rai ken cho chujo gyo o sho bo tako aku ju sa i se nin setsuga sho shuke. Samyake zambo dai nen ga jijo butsu irai kuwan yakishi tani ho ben kyo ke chujo ro nyu butsu do san yo se setsu sho zen nan chi nyo rai sho en kyo den kai do da chujo. Tashin wakaji koshin wakaji tashin wakaji koji wakaji taji cho cho gon setsukai jitafu go shoi shaga nyorai nyoji chiken sangai shiso mu ushoji nyakatai nyakachichi gakumuzai se. He jitsu he go he nyo he I funyo sangai ken no sangai nyo shi shi ji nyorai myo ken mu ushaka myo I sho shujo ushu shujo shuju yakushuju gyo. Yokoro sho so senga ni nyaka ni nen hi yu ganji chuju sebo so sa butsuti miso sanpai nyo se ga jo butsu irai jindai kuwon jumyo muryo asogi ko jo jo fun betsu sho zen nanchi. Shoujo jumyo konyu mi jinbu bai choshu nengan hi jitsu metodon ni ben shogun toshu metodon yorai ise ho ben kyoke chujo sho ichaga nyakabuku ju ose. Sengan bingu ge senton jagago yakanyu o ogatomo kemo chu nyaken norai josai fu betsu menki kyoshi ni e endai fu no sho o nanzo shiso. Iho ben setsubi kuto shi shobu su se nanka chigu sho ishaga sho yakadong ninka moryo yakasama no ko wakaru ken bata wakafu ken chai chi ko gasa se gon. Token shishu toto monyo se go hito sho o nanzo shi so shinne renbo katsugo o butsu benzu sengan se kon yorai juifu jitsu metsu nigan metsu do uzen nanchi sho butsu nyorai. Kai jitsu go hinyoro ichi e so datsu myoren ho yakuzenchi jubyo gonin ta sho shi sokunyaka juni junai chi yakachu I uji en onshi yokokosho shi ogo onta doko yaki hatomonan and then nuji jeji gobu. Shoshi on daga waka shichahan shin waka fushi sha yoken gobu kaidai kangi haiki monjin zennan nongi gato guchi go bukataka yaki genken kuryo kyochi chumyo. Kuno nyo ze e sho kyobo guko yakusho shikiko mimi kai setsuku sakatoshi wago yoshiro bukuni sa ze gan shidai ro yakushikiko mimi kai setsuku sakanyoto ka baka shakujo kuno mubu chugengo chochi chu. Shikigo guko sakaben bakashi byojin joyo yoshi shinja kenga burai suya kangi manjingu jakajibyo nenyo go yakani fuko bakasho wishaga doke jinyo shippan chinko oshiko shikiko yakani ifumi. Shishi kamini dokasho chu shingai tendo sui gengaki gusha kuryo nyose ko yakani fuko bukuga konto setsa ho ben ro bukushi yakasokaza se ganyo to tochi. Zekoro yakakonru zai shi nyokachu bukamutsu fusai sa sekyo ibushi ta kukukenshi gengo nyobu ichi. Mambu hai sho shindai uno nisa zenen yakabu cha sha jimin gato no ken kugo koncha saga onso ta kokuchi ui koro mubu jiko joi hiken. Shi yakashiki go mimi sakashu bakashi dakabyo kaya gaba manchi shichi chokashai jin ben raiki genshi. Shosen nanchi o I unga ha uni no se shiro I komo zaifu hocha se sanbutsu gonga yakanyo ze jo butsu irai. Hyakusenma nakanayu da asogi ko ishu joko I hoben rikigon do matsudo yakamu uno nyoho setsuga komo kasha niji se son yakuju sensigi ni setsuge gon. Shoko shoko shumuryo hyakusenma nakasaya sogi jo seppo kyoke mushu akushu shoro nyu o butsudo nirai muryo ko ido chujo ko hoben gen nehan. Shushi seppo gajo ju oshi icho jindu rikido tendo suzo shigan ni fuken shuken ga metsuro koku yoshari genkai renbo ni shoketsugo shin. Shichijiki inu nani shinyo kenbutsu fuji yakijim yoji gagu suso kusutro ju zengaji go chuzo josai chifu metsui ho benriko. Koku shujoku gyo shingo shagabu ohi chui setsumu joho nyoto fumanchi tani ga metsudo ga kencho chuzo motsuzai oku kai kofu ingenshin. Ingo shin renbo nai shitsui seppo jinzu rikinyo se o asogi kojo zairo ju senkyu yocho chuzo shujo kenko jindai ka shochoji. Teni joju manon rincho do kakuchuju ocho gan hoju dake ga shujo choyu rakusho tengaku tenku josa shugi gaku umandara ke sambutsu daishu. Nishu kencho jinu fujoku no nyose setsuju manze shosai shujo iyaku go inen ka asogi ko fuman zambom yocho uchuku doku. Sogai kengai shinzai shini seppo wakaji ishi shu setsubuta du muryo kunai kenbusha I setsubuta nanchi gachi rikinyoze. Jumyo mushu koku shugo shotoka nyoto uchi chamoto chichogi toran yo yojin butsugo jippu konyo isen hoben ichi oshiko zuzai ni ganchi. Kushoku kenshai bambu tendo jizuzai ni ga metsu ijo kengako ni shokyo shishin ho itsudaka go yokoda o akado chuga chochi chujo gyodo fugyodo zuyo chokado. Zizazen eni garyo shujo tokenyu mujodo sokujo jubushin namu. Hamyo renge kyot hanamu. Hamyo renge kyot hanamu. Hamyo renge kyot. Namu myoho renge kyo. 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 Myoho renge kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. 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 Congratulations. Thank you, everyone.